Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 15 of Outside the Letterbox. Today, we're going to be discussing what we've watched recently, some recent film news, and discuss Scott Derrickson's Deliver Us from Evil. But first, you can find more episodes of Outside the Letterbox on our website, the-letterbox.com, and on iTunes by just searching for Outside the Letterbox. Leave us a review on iTunes or comment on our site. We have a lot of great articles up this past week, so you guys should really check it out if you have the chance and you haven't already. Today, I am joined by my two usual co-hosts. At long last, we are all reunited. Everybody say hello.
Hooray!
Hello.
Hi, it's Joe. I'm back.
Yeah. And Nick.
No one cares about
I'm just gonna walk off like in Arrested Development, have like the Charlie Brown music.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, let's just get right into it then. Who do we want to start with? Nick, what have you watched recently?
So I've watched a couple of things this week, but the kind of the most noteworthy movie I watched was probably Cleopatra, which is kind of an infamous movie because I think certainly when it came out, it was the biggest budgeted movie ever made. I think it was originally supposed to be made for like $2 million and wound up being made for like $44 million back in, I think it was like '63, and I guess adjusted for inflation, that's like the most expensive movie ever made, and it's also like the only movie in history to be #1 at the box office but still lose money. So it's one of those things that kind of has a bad reputation preceding it. And so it was one of those things where it's like, well, obviously we're so far removed from that. I just kind of wanted to check out the movie and see if it actually holds up as a movie. And I kind of picked the worst time to throw it on. I put it on at like 10 o'clock at night, and the movie is just over 4 hours long. And apparently somewhere there's like a 6-hour cut of the movie. But I enjoyed it for what it was. I don't think it's one of the greatest movies ever made. I mean, basically, when you boil it down, it's basically Elizabeth Taylor hooks up with Rex Harrison in the first half hour, or the first half of the movie, and then Richard Burton the second half. Like, obviously, there's way more like political and geographic, complexity to that whole thing, and the relations between Egypt and Rome. There's some cool battle stuff, a lot of cool artwork. Backdrops and set decoration and all that stuff. So the movie works on that level. In terms of the actual story, though, and probably because of the length, it's not a movie that I would be looking forward to rewatching again. But it's definitely, I think if you're into film history, I think you should watch it probably at least once, and then probably watch the making of. And I think you'll get probably way more out of the making of than the actual movie.
So I have a question because I'm going to go next because I just watched an Elizabeth Taylor movie too. But is it very? This will get into what I'm going to talk about. Is it very like old school Hollywood?
Yes and no. I mean, like certainly the way the movie's shot and done and whatever, but it's actually kind of for the time anyway. Like I was kind of surprised because when you think of these giant epics, you think of stuff like Ben-Hur or the Ten Commandments or whatever. And so this one had a lot of, not nudity, but like as close as you could get to it without actually getting there. Like more so than I was expecting. I was like, oh wait, what year was this movie made? And it was early '60s, so it wasn't quite the norm for back then. So there's a lot of that, but otherwise, I would say it's pretty old school Hollywood.
Okay. Is that Joe? Did you have anything to say on that?
No, I haven't seen Cleopatra yet. I always saw it sitting on the Hollywood video shelf when I was a kid. Just never picked it up.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess I'm gonna go next and just bring up what I watched so we can talk about it. I read the play Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and then I actually just finished watching the movie this morning, and I I really enjoyed the movie. When I read the play, I didn't really get it at first. I read it and I was just like, wait, I don't know what any of that meant. And watching the movie, I imagine watching the play too, but watching the movie, I was like, oh, okay, this all makes like way more sense, and it's just because I think you get a little more of the emotion behind every line and how it's all sort of connected. But it was I mean I asked if Cleopatra was very old school Hollywood because this movie, while it's a fairly old movie, is in 1966, which is pretty that's pretty much the end of the Hays Code at the time. This movie was not only pretty racy. The play is pretty racy, but it was also very not old school Hollywood in terms of its acting. Like Elizabeth Taylor gives this insane performance that just feels really real and sort of raw. And George Burton's in it too, so he does the same thing, and it's just a really sort of intense 2-hour movie of them pretty much just going at each other. It's actually funny. There's another actress in it. I'm gonna try and look up her name. Who she does a really good job too. There's only 4 characters in the whole movie and the whole play. They just all of them. There's definitely a weaker one in the group, but all of them do a pretty awesome job in this movie of just making these characters feel real and making what's going on feel real. So if you guys, either of you seen it?
No, it's always been on my list of things to watch, and I might check it out just because we're talking about it now. But the biggest thing that I always heard of when people talked about it is it was a big barrier pusher in terms of language, and it seems like to me maybe if you were to watch the movie now without realizing the context, it wouldn't seem like a big deal, the language that's used in the movie.
Well, that's the thing though, is because of the way it's filmed, the way it's shot, it seems like a movie that's older. Even the soundtrack and everything to it, it feels like a movie that's older. So when these people start, calling each other bastards and sons of bitches and stuff like that in the movie, and yelling it at each other, and then making all these sexual innuendos and stuff, you're just it makes you look up when the movie was made and figure out.
So it almost comes off as this weird juxtaposition.
Exactly. Yeah. So which is actually really appropriate for what the play I think is trying to do, in terms of questioning the time the play was written, is sort of questioning the American dream of a perfect family. So the other actress, by the way, who does a great job is Sandy Dennis. I don't know if you've seen anything else with her in it. She's in the Out of Towners, but she's the whole thing is just, it's really interesting to watch because it feels like it feels like the way they're dialoguing and the way they're acting is almost like a modern indie film, but then a lot of the filmmaking is still very old school Hollywood. So it just sort of all caught me off guard, if that makes sense. But anyway, I highly recommend it if you get a chance to watch it. I just think it's at least really well acted, if nothing else. But I just really enjoyed it. So I also watched. We're gonna do these one after the other because they are linked. I watched Scott Derrickson's Sinister, which I had seen before in theaters, and is still a really solid horror movie. I had to watch it with the lights on. I kept looking away, to Facebook or something at certain parts. Just remembering how it was watching it in the theater when I couldn't look away was just ugh. I think it's a pretty rough horror movie to get through.
Yeah.
But after that, I think we all liked Sinister, right?
Oh, I love
Sinister. I was
Sinister.
a big fan of that.
Okay. After Sinister, it was 11 o'clock at night, and I was like, I'm not going to bed right now because no one else was in my apartment. So I was just like, oh man, I'm not going to bed. So I turned on The Notebook.
That is that's an extreme right there.
Well, I had to do an extreme, man. After watching Sinister, I wasn't gonna go watch, I don't know, I wasn't gonna go watch Hellraiser or something. But the The Notebook. So it's a movie that like I've only seen parts of, and certain. Oh man, this is gonna sound sexist, but a lot of my female friends
Wait,
have told me to watch all of it.
wait, you've never seen the whole thing before?
No, I've never seen the whole thing. I've seen the end, so I know how it ends.
That's weird. 'Cause I feel like you would have seen the whole thing before I ever would have. No offense or whatever.
No. I know what you mean. I mean, one of my favorite movies is Pride and Prejudice, so
Yeah, exactly.
I get where you're coming from. But all I got to say about the movie is, I mean, it's a fairly. I'm not exactly sure why it's so loved by people, because I feel like it's fairly standard like romance fare. And I don't think it's a bad movie by any means. It's well made, well acted. Everybody does a good job in it. But I just thought overall it just felt like a lot of other romance films. So that's how I felt about The Notebook. And I was able to go to sleep after watching The Notebook.
But you fell asleep during The Notebook.
No, actually I didn't. It kept my attention enough, so I guess that's a plug for it. But anyway, so that's how I felt about that. Wait, Nick, you've seen it though?
Yeah. I saw it like 3 years ago, and like it's okay. I mean, from what I remember. Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, it was like the first Nicholas Sparks movie to come out. So there's like, every movie that comes out just feels kind of like a carbon copy of it. It just loses, it just becomes more and more bland,
I guess that's probably why it's the so loved then, I guess, is because it was the really kind of the first Nicholas Sparks movie.
Yeah.
But now there's so many that it just, to me, it just was kind of like, eh. So.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just still picturing on the back of the DVD cover a quote that says, "It didn't put me to sleep, Paul Duda."
Exactly. So anyway, Joe. So what have you watched recently?
I watched a couple classics from the 50s this week. Classy movie. Okay, no, I didn't really. I watched Wayne's World for one.
I love Wayne's World.
Which is actually surprisingly, this is my first time watching Wayne's World. I mean, it's kind of like the same thing as Monty Python and the Holy Grail, where I feel like a lot of people have seen like a lot of the sketches and the bits and pieces and lines from the movie, but I don't know how many people have actually sat through the entire movie, beginning to end. So, yeah, there's not really a whole lot to say about it. It's funny. It's simple. It's not worth overanalyzing. I enjoyed it. Whatever,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's funny to see what what's his name? The main guy. What's that? Yeah, Mike Myers.
Mike Myers.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting to see just kind of like from that, and then Austin Powers and and then I was thinking about it. I was like what? Where's that guy gone? Like what was the last movie he did? Was it the Love Guru?
No, I thought he had something after the Love Guru, but the Love Guru like tanked and is pretty much like widely derided as just a flat out like copy of Borat. So he's sort of like just fallen off the map because he sort of is. It's basically like he's what do you call it? Shamed or something.
The Love Guru shamed Mike Myers.
But apparently,
I mean,
go ahead.
If you look at what he's done, and if you don't count Shrek, it basically goes the Cat in the Hat, the live action one, the Love Guru, and then his really small part in Inglourious Bastards. Otherwise, he hasn't done anything else live action in a long time.
That's right. He was in Inglourious Bastards. I forgot about that.
Yeah. Which was hilarious. But yeah, other than Shrek, he hasn't really done much. Apparently, according to IMDb, there's an Austin Powers 4 that's been announced, but I don't know how many people are going to be looking forward to that, because I mean, I enjoy Austin Powers on a very base level, but I don't know that we need 4 of them in the world.
We need 26. We need as many Austin Powers movies as Bond movies. The other movie that I watched this week was it's a movie that I've been curious about since I first saw, just mainly based on the way it was made more than my actual interest in the movie. It was called Escape from Tomorrow, which was a tiny independent film that was illegally shot in Disneyland, and Disney never took any action against them. They just kind of let it happen, after it was released, and they just kind of like, oh, okay, well, whatever. I guess we'll just.
Wait, Joe, they let it go.
Oh,
Oh.
shut up. Anyway, this movie though, I think the reason it kind of made any attention, or the reason the reason it got any attention in the first place was, I think, mainly was that it got shopped around to film festivals and got shown around, and people actually watched it. Like, it actually got like a release on demand and that kind of stuff. I don't think it ever got a theatrical release. I think they figured that would be pushing it a little too far. But
if it did, it was very limited for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also known because they put like a lot of racy material in the movie. It's essentially a psychological horror film set in Disneyland, kind of, which sounds really interesting and really cool, but they play it off more as exploitation than anything. I mean, it's kind of like watching it. It's just kind of a nasty feeling movie from beginning to end. It's about this dad and his family, and they're going to Disneyland, and at the beginning of the movie, he finds out that he gets a call from his boss saying that he lost his job, and then just kind of from then on, he starts hallucinating, like the things in the small worlds, like have these evil grins on them, and then he catches cat flu, which is this thing that's apparently a thing going around. It's just a weird movie. It's like, as it goes on, it just gets more and more bizarre and more uncomfortable feeling, until eventually it escalates to the end, where it just kind of just becomes a nasty piece of crap that you just kind of wish you hadn't watched in the first place.
Yeah.
But it was interesting. It was interesting because you could always tell the parts that they shot in Disneyland, the parts that they shot just kind of at home or in their soundstage, whatever they had, because all of a sudden it would go from like very handheld shots. I mean, like very nice looking handheld shots. It's not like a found footage movie, but it's obviously, they have that someone's holding a camera, to all of a sudden like dollied shots and really steady tripoded shots and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I had heard that the movie, like, obviously it's an interesting premise, and the fact that it was shot illegally in Disneyland makes it even more interesting. Very, very, very few movies are shot in Disneyland, even with permission. I think one of the few that has was Saving Mr. Banks this past year. But I heard the movie like has an like interesting setup, and then never really delivers on sort of the sort of, I guess, acid trip that it kind of promises.
Yeah, exactly. Well, actually, clarify. It wasn't shot in Disneyland. It takes place in Disney World.
My bad.
Actually, in Florida. I kept forgetting that though. Throughout the movie, because I'm just like, oh, I don't know, I just think Disneyland, not Disney World, but whatever. But yeah, that's true actually, because it is very, very bizarre. It does have an escalation, but the escalation isn't necessarily in kind of, it's kind of like when the towards the beginning of the movie, again, like, he goes through the small world thing, and the characters in that, have like these evil grins on their faces. You're kind of hoping, oh, okay, I really hope we see like more of that, and it kind of escalates to like kind of this insane Disney nightmare, basically. But what they do instead is they kind of go a different direction, where the escalation isn't in the craziness that you really wanted to see, but instead in just kind of like this nasty stuff that takes place with these side characters in for instance, like hotel rooms and at the swimming pool, not in the actual Disneyland part.
Well, yeah, because there's only so much you can do without getting in trouble or getting permission from Disney.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like the problem is that the escalation isn't in the bizarreness, but it's more in just kind of the nastiness that they try to go for with the individual characters and how dark they want the ending to go.
Yeah, it almost sounds like if they had gone for a more like subtle premise, that it could have been a more successful, I guess, overall story.
Yeah, exactly. There's really nothing subtle about the movie. It's confusing at times. I was trying to piece together what exactly was going on because at some points you don't know what's actually happening in his head and what's happening in real life, because some things that happen in real life are kind of too bizarre for you to think like, oh, okay, this he has to be hallucinating this, but no, it's actually like happening. I'm like for instance, at one point, he gets separated from his wife in Disneyland. He's with his daughter, and he ends up hooking up with just some random woman that he meets there, and just kind of like you see that happen, and you're like, oh, he's just imagining it happening. No, he actually like went off and hooked up with this woman at Disneyland. Which just seemed like really bizarre because his daughter was there and everything. I don't know. It's just a weird, bizarre, just kind of a nasty feeling movie. And what I really would have liked to see is something more like Pinocchio, where it's kind of like a child's nightmare version of Disneyland, basically.
Nice.
So I would not recommend it.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess that sort of closes up our recently watched. Unless someone else has one last movie they want to fit in. Anyone? Okay.
No, I'm just working through Planet of the Apes, but I have an article series on that going right now.
Okay. Sorry, somebody is running the water behind me. I'm just kidding. So that's going to bring us to our next segment, which is the news, recent film news. Yeah, that's right. I'm looking at the document now. Recent film news. And apparently, okay, so hold on. We only have one piece of film news, and it's about a movie trailer. So there's a couple other movie trailers that I want to bring up, though.
Okay.
Just to mention. The first movie trailer is now somebody is defiantly running the water behind me. Can you guys hear that?
No, I can't hear it at all.
Okay, never mind. All right, so the first trailer I guess that we want to bring up is Horrible Bosses 2. So a couple years ago, Charlie Day, Jason Sudeikis, and what's that third guy's name? Oh my gosh.
Jason Bateman.
Macaulay Culkin?
Yeah. No. What? Okay. Anyway, they treated us to a great little comedy. It wasn't really that little, but a pretty funny comedy about just some guys who decide to kill their bosses. And needless to say, hilarity ensues. But I don't know about that movie. Like there's a lot of really funny stuff in it, but I think overall it fell a little bit flat. But it made a lot of money, so obviously they're going to make a sequel. But I am really excited to see a sequel because I love those three main characters and I love Charlie Day. So pretty much any time Charlie Day's in a comedy film, I'm pretty excited.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
I think from the looks of the new trailer, I think they had a missed opportunity, which would have been probably the braver and more difficult choice. But I almost think it would have been better if like they become their own bosses and then their own employees hate them, and then they find out that like their employees want to kill them. So then they have to, like, as opposed to like, oh, we have to do, it's a kidnapping this time instead of a murder. But it's got Christoph Waltz and Chris Pine in it, and I don't know if you guys have ever seen Smoking Aces or there's another movie with Chris Pine in it where he's just like nuts. You know, like Chris Pine, we're kind of used to him in like the Star Trek movies or like Jack Ryan or some of these others, you know, where like he can be like a fun, loose character or whatever. But in Smoking Aces and a couple other things he's been in, like he can get really unhinged. So I'm hoping we don't see much of him in the trailer, but I'm hoping we get that Chris Pine because I think that'll lend itself to a lot of fun moments in the movie.
Yeah, I agree. I have seen Smoking Aces, and just for our listeners, I do not recommend watching Smoking Aces. But that should totally be fun to see Chris Pine play that kind of a role, especially in this kind of like setting of a movie. I thought it was hilarious to see what's his name, Kevin Spacey, Colin
Oh,
Farrell, and even Jennifer Aniston, who's back for this movie, as ridiculous and racy of a character as she was. It was hilarious. Joe, what do you think?
You know, the original one, it's been a while since I've seen it, but I seem to remember it being really funny. But again, like it was more of it had funny individual scenes and moments as opposed to the whole movie holding together really well. Um, I just want to say I'm also really excited to see Chris Pine and Christoph Waltz in this one. I'm just really excited to see Chris Pine just playing that role. But that slow motion gag in the
oh
new
yeah.
just won me over. I think at this point.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
although as missed opportunities, Nick, I think they should have gone with horrible bosses, self-employment, where they hate their bosses who are themselves, so they have to try to kill themselves.
It's just it just ends with suicide. That's how the movie ends.
That's
Really dark and depressing.
really depressing, you guys.
5-minute horrible bosses sequel.
All right, do we have anything else to say about the Horrible Bosses 2 trailer?
No.
Okay.
Nope.
Okay, and
I think we talked about the trailer longer than the actual trailer is.
yeah. So anyway, check out the trailer. You can actually check it out on our site under the Trailer Park Thursdays from this past week. You can actually check out all the trailers we're going to talk about in that post. There's another trailer that I want to talk about that I just added, so this might catch you guys off guard, but I want to talk about for a reason. The Dracula Untold trailer. What did you guys think of that trailer?
It's I don't know. It's interesting. It's different than what I thought a Dracula Untold movie was going to be like. Although on the other hand, it seems like tonally they're going for something closer to like what the first 5 minutes of Bram Stoker's Dracula, the one by Francis Ford Coppola. It's almost as if someone watched that and they're like okay, let's turn that into an hour and a half action film. That's kind of the tones that I got from it. It looks interesting. It's different. It's not what I expected, but I'm curious. I'm cautiously curious.
Yeah, Nick, what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, kind of the same thing as Joe. Where it's like, oh, it's the first, it's the first 5 minutes of the Francis Ford Coppola Dracula expanded. Otherwise, like, it just seems to me to be another one in the long line of the horror fantasy revision or retold or whatever. So I mean, maybe another trailer come along and I'll get invested or interested in, but as of right now, like, probably not.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's kind of like it's. I mean, like I'm presuming you're talking about something like I Frankenstein, for instance, Nick.
Well, I mean, obviously those are two completely different movies, but it's they're kind of in the same conversation, I guess.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. I was just gonna say that because to me this one kind of caught me off guard just because I thought it was just gonna be like along the same lines as the same thing. I was like, oh, okay, it's another it's another Snow White and the Huntsman, I Frankenstein. I'm like, not that those are the same sorts of movies, but just kind of like they're doing kind of these fairy tales or these classic stories as re-envisioning them. But for this one, I don't know, just something about the tone of it kind of seemed a little more like it was trying to take itself seriously, as opposed to the other ones. The other ones just seem like they're trying to have a little bit more fun as just normal action movies.
Yeah, so I think I'm leaning more towards how Joe's feeling about it, except maybe even stronger. Because I almost didn't watch the trailer when it first came out because I saw the poster and I was like, man, this looks like I Frankenstein, like Maleficent, Snow White and the Huntsman garbage that you're just gonna change up the story and try and make it like darker. And even with something called Dracula Untold and the way the posters seem poised and everything, I was watching the trailer expecting a Maleficent type like revisionist story where we find out Dracula's actually a hero, you guys. But and that I'm not saying that's not the case, but judging by the trailer, I actually got, other than the fact that the special effects don't look entirely finished, I got really intrigued because it looks like it's going with like a really dark, serious kind of like almost like you said, the first 5 minutes of Bram Stoker's Dracula, but it almost looks like a descent into a horror film where it's like this big epic act, like sort of Middle Ages like war movie that has, this character making a deal with the devil to become a vampire to save his family, like that. And that's really, that whole thing is really intriguing to me because it's not just like, it doesn't seem as simplistic and sort of hokey as a lot of the other revisionist fairy tales that we've gotten, if that makes sense. So I'd agree with Nick in terms of being like almost like cautiously, or sorry, more with Joe, of almost being like cautiously optimistic about it,
Yeah. It's kind of the way I feel about it too. So I'm curious. I'm interested. I'll watch it. Hopefully it'll be good. It has promise.
Yeah. I was just surprised because I think judging by the first trailer, to me it has more promise than a lot of these other. It has more promise than Maleficent did, and that movie was crap.
Right.
So anyway, so that's gonna bring me to the last. Obviously, you guys can add trailers here if you want, but that's gonna bring me to the last trailer that I want to talk about. And I want to talk about this because I think it's similar to some of the interesting sort of independent films we're getting these days, like with Boyhood by Richard Linklater, which was filmed over the course of 12 years. That's being released
12
next
years
week,
to
right? What? No. Although I guess like metaphorically, no. That's being released July 11th in select theaters, and then it's expanding over the weeks. But this movie, The Disappearance of Eleanor Rigby, do you guys know anything about it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just going to talk about it. It was apparently originally shot as two completely separate films called.
It still is. It just depends on it depends on the release.
Right.
So
you'll, the theatrical release is going to be The Disappearance of Eleanor Rigby.
Well, that'll probably be the more mainstream one, but you'll still. I think they said they'll still release. What was it? His and Her or Him and Her, whatever.
Him and Her. There's actually, yeah. There's
it'll just be harder to find, I think.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is I understood that they were gonna like maybe release that as on demand or something, but anyway, regardless, there's actually I think 3 cuts of this movie, so of these movies I guess. So there's Him and Her, then they cut it together to be Them, and then I guess it was cut again to be The Disappearance of Eleanor Rigby, and or maybe Them is the same cut as The Disappearance of Eleanor Rigby with just a name change, but either way. Him and Her, it's the same love story, the same relationship, just shot from the guy's perspective and then the girl's perspective, which I just find like a really fascinating way to tell the story. And you can tell from the trailer, like obviously each person has their own perspective of what happened in a given moment. So I'm really excited to see it. It could totally just be like, you're watching the same thing over and over again. But considering it has James McAvoy, Jessica Chastain, Bill Hader, there's just some great actors in there that I'm really stoked to see in a movie like this. That's sort of, I guess, so creative in terms of how it tells its story. And like I said, it could be a total flop, but I'm stoked to see it. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I'm interested to see it. I mean, like it's kind of like a gimmicky idea, but I think I think if it's done well, it'll work.
But Boyhood is a gimmicky idea too.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like there's the bad version, there's the good version of it, and I think it's I think it'll probably be the good version.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still haven't seen the trailer yet, so.
Okay. Well, anyway, was there any other movies you guys wanted to talk about? There's the St. Vincent trailer, the Skeleton Twins trailer. There were some great trailers this week.
The one I'm really interested in is Foxcatcher.
Yeah. No, I am totally in. I actually messaged. Didn't I message you guys when I first saw that trailer or the
Yeah,
second
you did.
trailer? Um, there's just something really weird about those trailers in like a good way, like it's supposed to be that way, you know?
Yeah,
It's because it's Steve Carell, and like I have never seen him this way before.
I keep forgetting
it
it's Steve.
looks yeah, it looks like unusually dark, and like this is gonna be a weird thing to say, but like even like a horror movie, like a trailer, will start off with like a moment of like levity or whatever, but like everything we've seen from Foxcatcher, and I don't know if it's the way it's shot or like the music or whatever, but it doesn't seem like there's any. They haven't shown us like any light moments. Like it all seems like really brooding and intense and foreboding, and
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
really intrigued by it.
It's like if the girl with the dragon tattoo were Channing Tatum and arrested.
Uh,
That's honestly like that's the kind of feel I get from this movie is a girl with the dragon tattoo kind of feeling. Um, but yeah, I'm really intrigued to see that movie for sure. So,
yeah.
um, were there any other ones you guys wanted to talk about before we move on?
Nothing I got.
That's it.
Alrighty, well that's going to bring us to our main topic for this podcast. Scott Derrickson's "Deliver Us from Evil."
Speaking of Foxcatcher, that's okay.
So yeah, Deliver Us from Evil. Like I said, we all liked Sinister. I think I'm a big fan of Exorcism of Emily Rose too, even though it's not
Yeah, same here.
very well critically received. Uh, what did? Okay, so who wants to go first in terms of Deliver Us from Evil? I'm gonna go last.
Okay, gotcha. I um Nick, you want to go first?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know.
Well,
Like,
one
oh,
thing,
I'm going to talk first, and he was just like, no, you go.
well, well,
Um,
it's interesting. One
are you going to say something,
one thing.
Joe?
What's that? Well, no. Well, no. I was gonna say one thing that
Well,
one thing
are you going to talk or no?
Okay,
no.
all right, everybody stop. Joe's going first.
Well, okay, I wasn't going to talk about the movie. What I was just going to say was that it's interesting because we haven't talked about this movie, I think, with each other a whole lot beforehand. Whereas usually we kind of know each other's opinions beforehand. Whereas with this one, I feel like we don't really have like a great idea of like individual thoughts, but we have an idea of like what we each general opinions of the movie. So
Yeah. All right. So Nick, do you want to
Okay.
go ahead and give your opinion first?
Yes, I'll give kind of a brief thing. So I really dug the movie. I thought it was a really interesting take on a horror movie, and especially like the exorcism genre, because ever since the original Exorcist, it seems like every movie is kind of like trying to attempt the same thing. And I think of the exorcism kind of rip-offs or whatever. Emily Rose is probably the best one of that lot. And so it's interesting because Derrickson goes back to kind of that genre of exorcism horror, and he does something different with it. And I don't think the movie like transcends the genre or whatever in any way, but I think it does enough interesting things within the genre, and by combining it with kind of a like a crime film and like a police procedural, that it kept me engaged the whole time, and it threw, I think kind of making those choices.
Oh, Nick, we lost you.
you lose Nick.
Yeah, we lost Nick. So
One
Joe.
down.
Wait, hold on.
Well, that was a good podcast, guys. I guess we'll.
Horror movie, I'm surprised to say I enjoyed
Nick, hold
more
on.
than I thought I would.
Nick, stop. You got to go back a couple minutes because you dropped out.
What?
You dropped out.
Oh, did I?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we didn't
Oh.
hear what you said.
Oh, so you didn't hear anything.
No, we heard you.
Part of it.
We heard you. So start from you were saying you don't think it transcends the genre in any way.
Oh, I don't think it like, is like this big thing of like, oh my gosh, like it's, change, it smashes all expectations or whatever. No, like it's very much in the genre and uses the tropes, and and I think it just the idea of like combining it with a police procedural was an interesting choice, and I think by doing kind of a left-handed move in that regard, it allowed Derrickson to kind of make other choices, whether it's with certain characters or certain stylistic things that just when I came out of it was like, okay, like there were enough interesting things that kept me engaged, and that I feel like, especially for a horror movie, like I enjoyed it more than I thought I was going to. Because like with a horror movie, like my whole thing is whether like I get scared or not. Like that's a huge barometer for me. But like this one, I was more engaged with it as a film, and I just kind of thought it was interesting in that regard. So that's me.
All right, Joe, what did you think?
Yeah, well, going into this one, I think I actually had pretty high hopes for it. I wouldn't say high expectations, but I had high hopes for it just because yeah, I'm a big fan of Scott Derrickson's stuff. I love the Exorcism of Emily Rose. I really love Sinister. I felt like Sinister was different as far as horror movies go. I hadn't really seen anything that darkly terrifying in a while and kind of unique in its premise. So I was really looking forward to this one, seeing him go kind of going back to his going back to the Exorcism movies. When I first watched it, as in like right after I finished watching it, and I got out of the theater, I thought, wow, that was a great movie. I really enjoyed that one. Another great horror movie. The more I thought about it, the more I'm finding myself being a little disappointed by it, though. And I think part of that involves one thing. Well, for one thing, this isn't nearly as scary as Sinister. It is scary. It has some great moments, but as a whole, the movie's more interesting than it is frightening, which is fine for a horror movie. I mean, like if you have a horror movie that isn't that scary, it's okay. It's okay if it's an actual, just like a good movie in general, But my main problem was that taking that away, there's not really a whole lot to the movie. Like I felt like I wanted to see these characters in a different movie, because this one, in the end, it just kind of became another exorcism movie. It had a great exorcism scene, but it's kind of like they have kind of like the beats of an exorcism movie with the demons and the possessions and that kind of stuff, and then the movie kind of wraps it all up, and you're like, oh, okay, well that was a nice little exorcism movie. Not really a whole lot much to it other than that. What really held it together for me though was the two main characters, like the cop and the priest. I really want to see like a series of movies, of horror movies, starring these two guys working together against like demonic forces and crime and that kind of stuff. Eric Bana, I really loved his character in this one. I thought he did a really good job of pulling off kind of the Bronx cop, who knew the area well and just kind of was really good at fighting down crime, and is up against something that he's never seen before, and so he's not quite sure how to go after it, except for just the way he always has gone after things. So yeah, it was interesting. It wasn't a bad movie. It was enjoyable. I liked it. Not as good, I think, as The Exorcism of Emily Rose and Sinister, if you're comparing it to Derrickson's other works, but yeah, it's still a solid movie.
Yeah, so I'm definitely more inclined to agree with Joe on his latter feelings. I think that Deliverance from Evil is a decently well-made movie. Like everything about it is competent, but there was literally nothing in it, for me at least, that felt different from any other exorcism movie. Even the idea of like the police procedural, to an extent, is something that I feel like we've seen in other exorcism movies, just maybe not to the same depth. In terms of like we saw the police investigating it, we just didn't see, like, those weren't the main characters. So there was nothing different for this movie for me than from the Possession or even what are some other exorcism movies that I'm blanking on right now? Like there just wasn't anything to differentiate it from a lot of other exorcism movies, and then it felt like the police procedural parts felt like kind of like a almost like a I don't mean this to sound so negative, but almost like a toned down version of like Seven. So it was just overall like a decently well-made movie. And the thing is, like, even with Joe, like if you take away the horror parts of it, which in my opinion, like nothing in this movie scared me that much. Either Sinister terrified me. Exorcism of Emily Rose, I think, is pretty scary, and that also has some unique aspects to it. The way it's played out, that sort of differentiate it, not entirely, but differentiate it a little more, I think, than this one does. And if you take away the horror aspects of it, the central like characters, while their character arc is good and like decent, it's also very sort of like cookie cutter. Like there's trouble at home because he's not there enough. That's very cookie cutter, especially in horror movies. And that it's funny because that was a similar thing in Sinister, but the way it played out in Sinister was like there was somewhat of a mystery there in terms of you didn't exactly know what the main character was hiding from his wife until, like you didn't know everything that he was hiding from her, basically. Or at least there was the anticipation of finding out what her reaction was going to be when she found out what he was hiding from her. And that just felt like that relationship was more central to what horror was going on to these people than this guy's family off on the side that's because he's not there is getting somewhat oppressed. That just felt very cookie cutter to me. So the whole movie I think is decently well made. It's a fine exorcism movie, but there's nothing to me. There wasn't anything different about it except the use there are great scenes like the exorcism scene is a slightly different take on an exorcism scene, and those are always interesting to watch. But his use of the music, like your article said, Nick, I thought was interesting and solid. But other than that, like I don't know what I can't really recommend this movie over someone going to see The Possession, which was the Jewish exorcism movie that came out a year ago.
Yeah, I didn't care for The Possession. To me, it just seemed like literally the Jewish Exorcist, which with like this one, and I feel like it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, where like every movie since The Exorcist like is trying to do the same thing. Like the two things you can always count on in an exorcism movie is usually a woman getting possessed and then kind of either like writhing in bed, and that's where the exorcism is in the bedroom or whatever. And so I thought, and one of the best and most terrifying parts of this movie is Sean Harris, who plays the main possessed guy. He also played the guy who gets messed up in Prometheus, the guy with the red hair or whatever. He's terrifying in this movie, and you just like, it's just, to me, it was interesting to see a male character get possessed and be the antagonist as opposed to a female character, and just the whole location thing. I thought a lot of it, it's like I said before, like it's not changing, it's not reinventing the wheel or whatever, but it does, I think, enough interesting things within its genre that makes it kind of stand out, and in my opinion, slightly above a lot of the other rip-off movies.
Yeah.
Look, I gotta disagree. I don't think like even the location thing, like the location of where that exorcism was happening, like the police department, I thought the Possession actually had a more interesting final exorcism place than this one did. Like I said, I don't think this was a bad movie. I actually think The Possession is a worse movie, but I still don't. There wasn't anything different enough about this to make me recommend it to people over something like The Exorcism of Emily Rose or The Exorcist. It just didn't feel nothing.
I think those two. I think it's almost. To an extent, it's almost kind of unfair because those two are such giants of it. It's like basing every crime movie off The Godfather. Nothing's really ever going to hit that height for the most part. And I just think it's a really solid movie for its genre,
Yeah. Well. I mean, like I was thinking because it really is a fine movie. I mean, like Deliverance People it's a well-made movie. I think what my issue with it is that it doesn't. I mean, like for me at least, it it doesn't do anything beyond just kind of the beats it needs to hit for an exorcism movie. Like for instance, if someone asked me to recommend to them just kind of the epitome of an exorcism movie, I'd probably give them this one and say like, okay, it's a solid exorcism movie. You haven't seen any of the other ones, this is a good one to start off on, and and then move on to some of the other lower stuff. I mean, I enjoyed The Possession. It's a very silly movie, but it's kind of fun in its own way. This is a much better movie than that. Which one of these two I'd rather watch on any given day really depends on my mood, though. Because if I feel like watching something a little lighter, a little cheesier, I watch The Possession, which is also just fine. I mean, I really enjoy that one. But this one is one I probably watch if I'm more in the mood for something a little more serious and something more hits all the right in that case.
That's a really good way to put it, Joe. Like, especially if someone's never seen an exorcism movie before, like, this isn't a bad exorcism movie to watch because it pretty much is just like, it just hits all the pretty standard exorcism parts, Yeah. Like it's and the core of it is pretty good. But again, like, given in context of the history of exorcism movies, I can understand why people are not impressed.
Yeah. Well, even as far as that goes, because I was thinking about that. One exorcism movie. It's not really an exorcism movie, but it's a movie that I'd probably recommend to them before watching this one. Is The Conjuring, honestly, because I mean, like it kind of ends on a similar note as this one, and it has the exorcism scene and that kind of stuff. Much different kind of movie, but that one I feel that one's more of kind of a demonic haunting movie, I guess, more than an exorcism movie.
One thing I will give this movie in regards to The Conjuring is I don't know. Like, Nick, we saw The Conjuring together, and you were way more scared in The Conjuring than I was. And I'm not exactly sure what about The Conjuring is scarier to everybody, or I guess, like, everybody talks about The Conjuring being such a scary movie. I don't know what's scarier about The Conjuring than this movie, because I was pretty much the same level of scared for both of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I honestly think The Conjuring is a better movie, but I was not particularly terrified in either of them. And maybe I'm just becoming desensitized. But Sinister still terrified me.
Oh yeah, same here.
So I don't know. I don't know what that's about. That might just be a personal problem.
One thing that carries over from Sinister into this movie and kept me really on the edge of my seat was there's a sense of dread over both movies. So even when it's not a scary scene, you're still like, something's gonna happen, and especially in regards to like negative space in the frame. Like there's a moment in the movie where it's Eric Bana and Edgar Ramirez, and they're in a car together, and some of the angles are like close-ups on the characters, and it's like, okay, everything's fine. Then every once in a while we'll cut to a slightly wider shot where like the character would be in one half of the frame and the other half is like the open window, and I'm like, something's gonna pop up here. And so like even in this scene that isn't explicitly scary, like there's that sense of dread throughout, and that was something I remember noticing for the first time in Sinister, and that definitely carries over to this movie.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Well, I think for me, because I did find The Conjuring a lot scarier than this one, and this one has its moments. For me, what The Conjuring had that this one didn't, as far as fright value, was I think James Wan is really good at catching you with a jump scare. Well, first off, he's really good at setting up just kind of the right atmosphere to get you kind of ready for a scare, and you're really terrified of, okay, when's it going to come up? And then he has a jump scare, but he doesn't just have the jump scare. He has a jump scare, and he holds that fright value out as long as he can. So it's kind of it's almost like it's almost like he strings out a jump scare for as long as he can, and it leads directly into another scare, and he just keeps it up until the scene's done.
Yeah, I guess that's probably why, Joe, that you don't appreciate the Paranormal Activity movies the same way I do, because once I've already been jump scared, that's not the terrifying. Like, then I'm okay. Once I've already seen the thing, I'm okay. It's the suspense building up to the jump scare that's just the worst for me. I can't.
Right.
So right. That probably explains to an extent why I like the Paranormal Activity movies and you don't.
Yeah, that's true, actually. Yeah, that makes sense.
But there was one more thing I wanted to say about this. Oh, the the scene where the woman. This is a bit of a spoiler. We don't really need a spoiler discussion for this movie, do we? There's an exorcism. That's about it.
Spoiler alert for the rest of the podcast, I guess.
Yeah, do we want to just say right now? We'll get into spoilers then.
Yeah, we're going into spoilers now, but we only have like 2 minutes left in the podcast.
There's
anyway.
an exorcism.
But the scene where the girl jumps off of the roof.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, oh man, and they like had a shot of it, and then they cut away. I was like, okay, sweet, we're not gonna see that again. And then they like showed it, and the second time they showed it, it like held for like a weird amount of time. It was just
what
like
I hate about that?
a second too long for it to be like shocking. That like I was shocked, and then I was like, oh, that's really weird. Like, oh wait, we're still looking at it. Why are we still looking at it?
You know what's terrifying about that though was that what was terrifying about that was when I was writing the article that I posted this past week, and I was looking for pictures. I was like, oh, I'm just gonna look up stills from the movie, and someone had already uploaded that image, so it was right on the front page of Google Images. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. It was like 10 o'clock at night when I was putting that together. I was like, oh, dang it.
That's unfortunate.
As far as the scare value in this one, just kind of in general, I think my main problem with it was that he relied more heavily on jump scares, I think, in this one than he did in Sinister. Like in both films, there's a very strong sense of dread, but I felt like it was a lot deeper or darker, I guess, in Sinister. Like it was like watching Sinister is almost like going through a fog and not knowing what you're gonna come across, and you know it's gonna be terrifying and horrific. Whereas in this one, a lot of it was just kind of anticipations of, okay, when's the next jump scare gonna come? Jump scare comes, and then the rest of the scene isn't frightening. It's just more interesting than anything. Even the exorcism scene, the guy did a great job. The guy playing the possessed guy did a great job playing that part. I just didn't find the scene that scary as much as I found it like, oh, that's a really cool scene, you know.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. All right, we kind of have to wrap up because we're at our time limit. But you can find more episodes of Outside the Letterbox on our website, the-letterbox.com, and on iTunes by just searching for Outside the Letterbox. Leave us a review on iTunes or comment on our site. Nick, where can people find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at Shout92.
And Joe?
You can find me on Twitter at C as in Charlie, REDO Films. Yeah.
And you can find me at PFDUDA on Twitter. You can also find the Letterbox on Twitter now. That's at Letterboxers on Twitter. At the Letterbox was already taken, so we had to go with something else. So anyway, yeah, tune in next week.
Boxers that say Letterbox.
What's that? I didn't hear what you said.
I said, can we get boxers that say Letterbox?
I said, where can you post on that?
Oh my god.
Just across the butt.
Shut up. All right, just end it.
All right, we'll see you guys next week to talk about Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. So until then.